In February of 2011, 10 experienced mountain climbers vanished during an expedition in the far north of Alaska. They were young, skilled, and prepared for almost anything. But whatever happened on that frozen slope left no trace, no signal, and no explanation. For 13 months, their families searched, investigators guessed, and the world slowly forgot. Until one day, a helicopter pilot spotted something strange glinting beneath the snow, a torn piece of orange fabric. It was their tent, and what was inside it changed everything. The case began quietly, like most tragedies do. 10 climbers, 5 men, 5 women, members of an outdoor survival group based in Anchorage, planned an expedition to climb Mount Ilyasqa, a remote peak on the border of the Arctic Circle. It wasn't the highest mountain in Alaska, but it was among the most dangerous. Its slopes were unpredictable, sudden avalanches, sub-zero winds, and crevasses that could swallow a person whole. Few attempted it, and even fewer reached the summit. The group's leader was Daniel Hart, 34 years old, a decorated mountaineer who had summited Denali twice and guided over a dozen successful climbs. His team included his sister Lauren, her boyfriend Eric Dawson, twin brothers Miles and Noah Turner, a paramedic named Rachel Kim, a geologist named Matthew Ross, 2 college friends Sophie and Nathan Clark, and a quiet newcomer, David Wynn, an engineer from Fairbanks who had joined the group only months before. They called themselves the 10 North. For years, they had trained together, traveling across Alaska's harshest terrain. Every expedition was documented, journals, GPS coordinates, photographs, and videos. Their motto was simple: the mountain never takes you if you respect it. But this time, the mountain didn't care. On February 3rd, 2011, the team left their base camp near Lake Ilyasqa. They radioed park rangers that evening, reporting calm weather and steady progress. It was their last transmission. The following morning, radio silence. Then days passed, then weeks, and then the world above the Arctic swallowed their signal completely. At first, search and rescue assumed their radios had frozen or their batteries had died. But after 3 days without contact, a full-scale operation was launched. Helicopters swept the mountains, infrared scans searched for heat signatures, and snowmobiles combed the lower slopes. Nothing, not a tent, not a footprint, not a single dropped item. The only clue was found 5 miles east of their planned route, a pair of broken trekking poles and a glove frozen into the ice. DNA confirmed they belonged to Daniel. It was as if the team had simply vanished mid-climb. By mid-March, the search was suspended. The conditions were too dangerous. Snowstorms buried every trace of the trail. Families begged for the search to continue. But rescuers knew that in those temperatures, no one could survive more than a few days. It became Alaska's largest and most expensive mountain search on record. After 6 months, the investigation shifted focus. Journalists speculated about what might have happened: avalanche, equipment failure, a fall into a crevasse. But the lack of debris made every theory crumble. The mountain, people said, had simply erased them. Then came the first rumor. In late 2011, a hunter traveling near Ilyasqa Ridge claimed to have seen strange lights over the mountain, flickering patterns that moved against the wind. Others dismissed it as snow glare, but the story reignited public interest. The case became a national obsession. Experts compared it to the 1959 Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia, another group of experienced climbers who died under unexplained circumstances. But even that tragedy left bodies. This one left nothing. For 13 months, the mountain stayed silent. Then, on March 9th, 2012, a helicopter pilot conducting a geological survey spotted something in a glacial ravine, a flash of color, faint beneath the snow. He circled lower. It was fabric, bright orange, torn and half buried in ice. He marked the coordinates and called it in. When the recovery team arrived, they uncovered a tent, shredded but intact enough to recognize the manufacturer logo. It was the same model Daniel's team used. Inside, the contents were frozen solid. Sleeping bags, cooking gear, notebooks, and torn clothing were scattered inside like a storm had passed through it. But the strangest detail wasn't what was missing. It was how the tent had been set up. It wasn't anchored. The poles were bent from the inside, as if someone had ripped their way out, and there were deep knife slashes cut through the fabric from the interior. Every experienced climber knows that cutting open your own tent at night is suicide in Arctic weather. It's the last thing you would ever do unless you were trying to escape something. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Investigators found multiple footprints frozen near the site. Bare feet without boots. Some led downhill. Others circled the camp and stopped abruptly, as if the person had vanished mid-step. No animal prints. No signs of struggle. Just the tracks of 10 people walking barefoot in the snow. Inside the tent, one of the sleeping bags was zipped halfway, containing a small waterproof camera. When it was thawed and examined, it still worked. The last photo was time-stamped February 4th, 2011, the night they vanished. It showed the group smiling around a camp stove, bundled in coats, relaxed and calm. But the second-to-last image, taken just minutes earlier, showed something behind them. In the background, near the edge of the light, a shadow was visible on the snow. Tall, narrow, and humanoid. Investigators said it could have been a trick of exposure, a motion blur, or a reflection. But those who saw it said it looked like someone standing there, just out of the light, watching. The official report never mentioned that photo. But word leaked anyway. People began to form theories. Maybe it was a stranger, another climbing party, or even a military patrol. But no record existed of anyone else in that area that night. And the nearest base camp was over 60 miles away. When forensics analyzed the tent site, they found more anomalies. The snow around the camp showed evidence of intense heat, a thin layer of melted and refrozen ice, as though the surface had been briefly exposed to high temperature. Yet there were no signs of fire, no soot, no burned material. They also found something embedded in the snow 6 feet from the tent, a metal object, small and unrecognizable, shaped like a flattened sphere. It wasn't part of their gear. It wasn't military issue either. Tests showed it was made of an alloy that didn't match anything commonly manufactured. It disappeared soon after being sent to a federal lab. The case file marked it as unidentified sample, no public record. By spring of 2012, the tent's discovery reignited everything. Families demanded answers. Experts were divided. Some blamed a sudden avalanche, though the slope where the tent was found was too shallow for one. Others suggested hypothermia-induced confusion, a known phenomenon where victims tear off clothing in the cold. But that didn't explain the knife cuts, the heat traces, or the missing equipment. Half the group's packs, boots, and food rations were gone, as if someone had taken them. Yet there were no tracks leaving the site other than the barefoot prints. The more investigators searched, the stranger became. 2 weeks later, 700 meters downhill, they found the first body. It was Noah Turner. He was lying face down in the snow, barefoot, wearing only a thermal shirt. His skin showed no injuries, no signs of frostbite, despite being frozen for over a year. His expression, perfectly preserved, looked peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep. Nearby, his brother's watch was found, still ticking. It had stopped exactly at 2:46 a.m. That time, 2:46, will become the single most chilling clue in the case, because later, every piece of recovered equipment, cameras, watches, GPS units, had frozen at that exact same minute, as if time itself had stopped for all 10 of them. And whatever happened on that mountain happened fast. The discovery of Noah Turner's body reignited a case that had gone cold for more than a year. Forensic analysts, search teams, and even journalists returned to Mount Ilyasca. It was no longer a rescue mission. It had become an excavation, a search for truth buried beneath a year of snow and silence. Within days of finding Noah, a second body was located further down the slope. Rachel Kim, the team's paramedic. She was lying in a narrow ravine, half covered by snow, her hand still clutching a torn section of orange tent fabric. Her face was frozen in the same calm expression as Noah's. No signs of trauma, no broken bones, no struggle. Yet when the coroner thawed her remains, something strange was found. Her pupils were dilated, and the small capillaries in her eyes had ruptured. Her cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest caused by extreme stress. But what had terrified her enough to stop her heart in the middle of the Arctic night? Search teams began sweeping the area systematically. They found evidence that the group had fled downhill in a panic. Footprints diverging in multiple directions, some barefoot, some partially clothed, most leading toward a cluster of trees further below the ridge. It was there near the tree line that they found a small fire pit. The logs were burned clean through, but around the fire, the snow had melted unevenly, forming a perfect circle of hardened ice. In the ashes lay a fragment of metal cup, fused to a lump of glass-like rock, as if the soil itself had melted and solidified. The investigators couldn't explain it. There were no burn marks on the nearby trees, no evidence of a blaze strong enough to melt ground. It was as if a flash of intense heat had erupted for only a second, then vanished. 2 weeks later, 3 more bodies were recovered near the ravine. Daniel Hart, the group's leader, Lauren Hart, his sister, and Eric Dawson, her boyfriend. Their remains were found close together, huddled near a makeshift windbreak of branches and rocks. Daniel's hand was gripping his radio transmitter. It had been destroyed. The internal wiring melted. The metal casing was warped, like it had been exposed to lightning. But there had been no storms reported in that area for days before or after their disappearance. When the radio was sent for forensic testing, experts confirmed it hadn't been struck by lightning at all. It had been destroyed by an internal surge, something that overloaded its circuits from within. The same pattern was found in the team's GPS units. Every electronic device on the site had failed in the exact same way, at the exact same time, 2:46 a.m. Autopsies deepened the mystery. Daniel's lungs were filled with microscopic ice crystals, a condition caused by rapid exposure to freezing air after being in a much warmer environment. Lauren's skin showed signs of radiation burns, faint but measurable. Eric's bones were slightly magnetized. None of these findings made sense in natural conditions. Public speculation grew louder. News outlets compared the case to old Cold War experiments. Online forums suggested everything from secret weapons testing to environmental anomalies caused by magnetic storms. But there were no military facilities within 200 miles, and no record of any aerial activity that night. The FBI quietly joined the investigation, though they never officially took over. They interviewed the families, confiscated personal laptops and photos, and requested sealed copies of the autopsy results. Then they disappeared from the case just as quickly as they'd arrived. When reporters asked about federal involvement, they were told the FBI's presence was routine. But nothing about this case was routine. By late spring, 7 of the 10 climbers had been found, each recovered in a different position, each showing the same unexplained characteristics: no external wounds, calm expressions, and evidence of sudden temperature or energy exposure. 3 were still missing: Matthew Ross, Sophie Clark, and David Wynn, the quiet newcomer. Investigators traced their last known GPS points from the group's logs. They led to the opposite side of the mountain, far from the main camp. The terrain there was steep, covered in ancient glacial ice that had remained untouched for decades. When the search team arrived, they found something strange half buried in the snow. A second tent, smaller, partially collapsed. It wasn't on any packing list, and it wasn't registered to any of the climbers. The fabric was a different color, faded green, nearly invisible against the snow. Inside, they found nothing but a single lantern and a journal. The journal's pages were soaked and frozen together, but on the inside cover, a name was faintly visible under the frost. It wasn't any of the climbers. It read, A. Warren Surveyor, 1982. There were no records of a surveyor by that name ever being assigned to that region. but the coordinates written inside the journal matched the same slope, where Daniels' team had disappeared. The last entry was dated February 14, 1982, 29 years before the climbers vanished. It said, "Heard the sound again tonight. Not the wind. Low frequency. Vibrates through the ground. Instruments failing. Leaving tomorrow." That was the final line. The next page was blank. When geologists analyzed the area, they confirmed the mountain did produce a strange vibration, a low-frequency resonance that only occurred during certain weather conditions. It wasn't dangerous, but it could cause dizziness, nausea, even panic in some people. But that didn't explain melted soil, magnetized bones, or time-stop devices. In June 2012, investigators recovered the eighth body, Sophie Clark. She was found wedged inside an ice crevasse, as if she had fallen trying to climb down. Her body was preserved perfectly. No frostbite, no broken bones. But her hair had turned completely white. The coroner called it post-mortem discoloration. Others weren't so sure. Her watch, like the others, had frozen at 2:46 a.m. By now, the media called it the Ilyasca incident, a mystery that mirrored the Dyatlov Pass case, but had even fewer answers. Television crews arrived from all over the world. The families, exhausted from endless questions, begged the public to stop turning their grief into spectacle. But the world couldn't look away. Then, in August 2012, another piece of the puzzle emerged. A mountaineer named Tom Carver, who had been climbing alone on a neighboring ridge, reported seeing something embedded in the glacier. At first, he thought it was debris from an aircraft. When rangers checked the location, they uncovered a metal cylinder, about 4 feet long, half buried in ice, corroded and unmarked. It wasn't part of any known climbing equipment. It had no serial number, no identifiable purpose. The cylinder was hollow inside, but lined with burned insulation material. And at the bottom, they found something even stranger, a melted GPS chip from 2011. It belonged to Matthew Ross. The implication was chilling. Whatever that cylinder was, it had been near the climbers when they vanished, and whatever destroyed it had left traces of them behind. By autumn, the official investigation reached a standstill. The government released a short, carefully worded statement. It concluded that the 10 climbers had likely perished due to a combination of environmental and psychological stressors. They suggested disorientation, hypothermia, and panic had caused them to flee their tent, leading to fatal exposure. But even the coroner who signed the report didn't believe it. Privately, he told a journalist, "You don't melt rock with panic. You don't magnetize bone with fear." 13 months after the climbers vanished, the tent had been found. Their bodies had been recovered. But the truth, the thing that had driven them barefoot into the snow, remained buried until one final discovery, hidden in a frozen canyon 5 miles north of the original camp, finally revealed what had really happened on that mountain. A discovery so disturbing that the official report was rewritten overnight. And once again, the world was told a story, one version for the public and another sealed away forever. The final discovery came quietly, not through another search party or government report, but by accident. In September 2012, a volunteer rescue worker named Alan Pierce was surveying the lower ridge near Ilyasca Creek. His team had been assigned to mark unsafe sections of ice, not to search for evidence. But as he was driving stakes into the snow, his shovel hit something hard. At first, he thought it was rock. But when he cleared the snow away, he saw the corner of a plastic container, cracked but sealed. It was buried deep, as if deliberately hidden. He pulled it out, wiped away the frost, and saw faint letters etched into the lid. It said simply, "Team North Backup." Inside was a waterproof box. And inside that box, a small black camera. It was identical to the model Daniels group carried. The serial number matched the one listed in their packing log. Somehow, after 13 months under snow and ice, it was intact. When the authorities received the camera, they immediately sent it to the forensics lab in Anchorage. Specialists dried and cleaned the components. Against all odds, the memory card still worked. There were 56 photos and 2 short videos. The first 40 images were the usual. Shots of group at base camp, smiles, snow-covered peaks, frozen lakes, their orange tents standing bright against the white wilderness. They looked confident, excited, but after photo 41, everything changed. The lighting was darker. The smiles were gone. Their faces tense, confused. They were still inside the tent, the stove unlit, and the wind outside seemed violent. In one frame, Daniel is holding the radio, speaking, his mouth half open, his eyes turned toward the entrance. The next photo is blurred. The camera must have been dropped. Then the final image. It showed the inside of the tent, illuminated by a headlamp lying on the floor. The fabric was shaking, pulled tight from the wind. Lauren was turned toward the entrance flap. Behind her, on the tent wall, was a faint shadow, not human-shaped, not animal, but wide, almost circular. The shadow wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the tent. When investigators enhanced the image, they saw a faint distortion around the object, as if heat was warping the air near it. That was the last photo. Then came the videos. The first was only 12 seconds long. Static, faint voices, the wind howling. You can hear someone breathing quickly, maybe crying. Then Daniel's voice says, "Don't move. Everyone stay inside. It's passing." The second video, recorded a few minutes later, was longer, 2 minutes. The footage was erratic, the lens shaking, the sound distorted. You can hear shouting. A flash of light fills the frame, not lightning, not a flare, but a pulse, like the inside of the tent was hit by a wave of energy. Then the screen goes black. The timestamp on that video, 2:46 a.m., exactly when all their devices froze. Investigators were stunned. They couldn't explain the heat distortion, the pulsing light, or why the camera had survived while the other's equipment melted. They ran electromagnetic tests on the camera's metal casing. It registered faint magnetization. Whatever had affected the group's radios, GPS, and watches had touched this device too. When the footage was released to the families under confidentiality, one parent said quietly, they weren't running from the cold. They were running from something that was there. But what could it be? For weeks, the media speculated again: military experiment, natural gas explosion, classified aircraft. None fit the facts. The tent's position didn't match any flight paths. The mountains had no gas fields, no radiation sources, no test ranges. Then an independent researcher, a geophysicist named Dr. Olivia Kearns, made a discovery that pushed the case into darker territory. She obtained seismic records from February 2011, covering the area of Mount Ileaska between 2:40 and 2:50 a.m., the exact window of the incident. Her instruments had detected a short, powerful tremor. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't wind or avalanche movement. It was something else. A vertical pulse lasting just under 4 seconds. Dr. Kearns said she had never seen a pattern like it before. The tremor wasn't moving through the ground. It was coming out of it. That tremor's epicenter was directly beneath the coordinates where Daniel's tent was found. When the data was presented to the investigation board, they classified it immediately. Within a week, Dr. Kearns' research access was revoked. She received an email from the Department of the Interior stating her findings compromised sensitive geological data. She resigned the next day. Privately, she told a journalist that what she'd seen looked like a signal, not a quake. When asked what she meant, she said it was rhythmic, like something was calling up from beneath. Her comment fueled conspiracy theories again, but there was one more twist. In November 2012, a maintenance worker at the Anchorage Evidence Storage Facility reported an unusual incident. He'd been assigned to recatalog items from the Ileaska case: tents, cameras, clothing, personal effects. When he opened the box containing the recovered tent fabric, his handheld radio crackled. Static, then a deep hum. He thought it was interference. But when he stepped away from the box, the noise stopped. When he stepped back, it started again. The tent was emitting a low-frequency vibration, too faint for the ear, but enough to trigger his radio. Technicians tested it. No batteries, no power sources, just torn fabric that had somehow become electrically charged. The sound matched the seismic frequency from Dr. Kern's data. Whatever had happened on that mountain had imprinted itself onto their gear. By now, investigators had stopped talking publicly. Every report was redacted. Journalists were shut out. The mountain was declared off-limits for safety reasons. But quietly, another small team was sent to the site. Scientists, not rescuers. Their mission wasn't to recover remains. It was to measure. What they found deepened the mystery further. Using ground-penetrating radar, they discovered an anomaly beneath the snow, roughly 40 meters below the surface. A circular cavity, perfectly symmetrical, about 15 feet wide. It didn't exist on any geological maps. No lava tubes, no sinkholes, no caves. It was artificial. They drilled a small probe hole and lowered a camera inside. For a few seconds, they saw only darkness. Then the feed cut to static, not from loss of signal, but because something below was emitting interference strong enough to wipe it out. The footage that was recovered showed smooth, curved walls, not natural rock. Something built, something buried, and at the bottom of that chamber, something metallic. The next day, the site was sealed. The team was ordered off the mountain. Their notes were confiscated. The report disappeared. But one of the scientists leaked a single page to the press before vanishing. The page contained 3 words typed in bold: not geological origin. After that, no one was allowed near Mount Ilyasca again. All routes were closed, all trails blocked, and all satellite imagery of the upper ridge blurred in public databases. Families never got full closure. They were told their loved ones had died from environmental exposure, but they knew better. The calm expressions, the strange burns, the magnetized bones. It all pointed to something else, something the mountain had kept hidden for decades. By early 2013, the story faded from headlines. Another winter came, and the snow buried everything again. But for those who had seen the footage, the pulse of light, the trembling shadows, the silent 2:46 a.m., the memory never left. Whatever happened that night on Mount Ilyasca didn't start with them. It ended with them. And somewhere under the frozen earth of Alaska, the ground still hums. Because some mountains don't just take lives. They keep secrets. The Ilyasca case should have ended in silence. 10 lives lost, a frozen mountain, and a report that said nothing. But some stories refused to be buried. In March 2013, 1 year after the last search was called off, a whistleblower came forward. A man named Dr. Paul Hensley, a former contractor for the Geological Research Division in Anchorage. He claimed he had seen the internal files on the Ilyasca investigation, files that were never supposed to leave government servers. And what he said changed everything. According to Hensley, the anomaly discovered beneath Mount Ilyasca wasn't new. It had been first detected in 1978 during seismic surveys for potential oil fields. The report from that year described a recurring acoustic resonance of unknown origin beneath the mountain. In simple words, a pulse, a sound that didn't belong to the earth. He said the U.S. Geological Survey had built a small underground station near Ilyasca in 1980 to study it. The program was called Project Gateway, a name later erased from all public archives. The goal was to record, measure, and contain whatever was causing the resonance. But in 1982, something went wrong. The base was evacuated after what official documents called an uncontrolled harmonic surge. The structure was sealed, the site forgotten, and all records destroyed. The Surveyor's Journal found by Daniel's team, the one signed A War in 1982, was from that abandoned project. He hadn't been a lost explorer. He had been one of the last people inside the base before it was buried. When Hensley leaked portions of the report, investigators finally understood the pattern. Every few decades, Mount Ilyasca emitted low-frequency tremors, short bursts that caused magnetic interference and radio blackouts. Scientists never figured out why. They believed it was geological. But the 1982 data revealed something that made no sense. The tremors were mathematically rhythmic. The intervals between pulses weren't random. They formed a sequence. And that sequence matched the one recorded by Dr. Olivia Kearns 30 years later. The same signal the climbers had captured in their final footage. Whatever was beneath Mount Ilyasca wasn't a natural fault. It was repeating something. When reporters pressed Hensley for more, he refused to elaborate. He said only this: "There are things buried in that ice that we didn't put there. Things that remember." Weeks later, his apartment in Fairbanks was found empty. His phone disconnected. Neighbors said he had packed overnight and left town. He was never seen again. After his disappearance, a classified memo surfaced on an encrypted forum, posted anonymously. The memo referenced unverified energy phenomena and listed coordinates that matched the exact location of the sealed chamber beneath Ilyasca. One line stood out: "The harmonic event reoccurred. Recontainment unsuccessful." 3 days after the post appeared, it was deleted. So was the account that shared it. That same week, local residents living near the mountain began reporting strange behavior in their electronics. Phones flickering, radios humming, television signals distorting at 2:46 a.m. every night, the same time the climbers' watches had frozen 2 years earlier. The government issued a brief statement, calling it a satellite interference issue. But engineers found no cause. It ended as suddenly as it started, after exactly 7 nights. For the families, the truth never came. Daniel Hart's parents moved away from Alaska, unable to bear the memories. Lauren's mother wrote in her journal that she still heard her daughter's voice in dreams, calling from far away, her words distorted, echoing through static. She said, "I think the mountain is talking back." In 2015, a research team from the University of Washington quietly applied for a permit to study electromagnetic anomalies in the Ilyasca region. The application was denied. When asked why, a federal representative said, "That area is restricted due to unstable ground." But satellite data showed no landslides, no hazards, just silence. The mountain was sealed again, fenced off, guarded by signs that warned trespassers to keep out. And still, hikers sometimes went missing there. Not often, just 1 or 2 every few years. But enough to keep the legend alive. Those who came back spoke of hearing a low hum late at night, vibrating through their tents. A sound you could feel in your chest more than hear. Some said it made them dizzy. Others said it made them calm, like something was calling them deeper into the dark. One hiker, a veteran named Eli Grant, claimed he saw a faint orange glow seeping to the snow at the base of a ridge near the old trail. He said it pulsed slowly, like breathing. When he got closer, his GPS froze, his compass spun, and then everything went quiet. He turned back. When he looked again, the glow was gone. His story was dismissed as exhaustion. But his watch, the one he wore that night, had stopped at 2:46 a.m. In 2017, a documentary team tried to film near Ilyasca. They were granted a 1-day aerial permit. But when they flew over the coordinates, the pilot reported an electromagnetic disturbance. His instruments failed, the camera drone lost control, and every piece of footage from that moment corrupted. Only one image survived, a still frame captured seconds before the camera shut down. It showed the mountain peak under a gray sky, and just above it, faint but visible, a perfect ring of light. Scientists said it was lens flare. Others weren't so sure. To this day, the Ilyasca region remains off limits. The official record still calls an accident. 10 experienced climbers caught in sudden weather. No mention of melted rock. No mention of magnetic residue. No mention of a pulse that repeats every few decades. The files are sealed under the National Geological Safety Act, and those who have seen them, the few who dared to speak, say the last entry in the case file reads simply, "Activity dormant. Next cycle, undetermined." That line raises one final question. What happens when the next cycle begins? Because if the data is right, Mount Ilyasca doesn't just echo the past. It repeats it. The climbers' watches stopped at 2:46 a.m. The tremors began at 2:46 a.m. And every few decades, the mountain hums again at the same time, as if remembering, as if waiting. And maybe that's the real story, not about what killed them, but about what called them there. Something they didn't understand, something ancient, something that wasn't meant to be found. Maybe the truth isn't buried in the ice. Maybe it's still alive beneath it, because mountains don't forget. They listen, they record, they remember the footsteps, the laughter, the fear, and the silence that followed. They keep it all, frozen in layers of time, repeating over and over until someone new comes to listen. The Ilyasca incident was never solved, and maybe it never will be. But if you stand at the edge of that mountain when the wind is still and the night is quiet enough, you might hear it. That faint, steady hum beneath the snow. Not the wind, not the earth, but the memory of 10 voices calling home, trapped in the cold forever. And if you ever hear it, don't listen too long, because the mountain remembers you, too.